Welcome to the Hustle or Bust podcast powered by Paver Art. Our mission is simple: to dive deep into the world of entrepreneurship, small business, and all the success, struggle, and challenges that need to be confronted in the pursuit of growth. We celebrate the entrepreneurial spirit, but perhaps most important, we want you to learn at least one idea that you can put into action immediately to make your investment in time worthwhile. In today's episode, we build on episode 2, where we discussed offense, tactics that can help prepare for an economic downturn, except we talk through the flip side, which are defensive tactics. We hope you can find an idea or two to put into action at your business. We talked about, we'll call it offensive measures that a small business should take when you're anticipating that there could be a downturn in the economy that could affect your business in a negative way. Let's talk about a little bit about the defensive tactics that you can take that will hopefully help to counter the negative effects of that or lessen them. What did you have in mind? What's uppermost in your mind when you're talking about a defensive tactic?
The obvious one is all the cost expense lines on a P&L. Mm-hmm. It'd be the last one I would go to, though. Usually the biggest expense in a business is labor, mm-hmm. outside of materials, but labor. Small businesses, we've got under 10 employees. Let's just say the number 7. You take one employee out to try and manage through this, that's not like you've got 100 people and you take one out, where it's 1% of the workforce.
Yeah.
You start getting into double-digit reductions, which is what one person means. Yeah. You've got a completely different business. You really do. And then what happens if someone gets hit by a bus and now you're down 2 guys? Then you're struggling to survive. So I think of, in a small business context, labor's the last thing. Efficiency, throughput, most important in my opinion. What's throughput? Throughput is how much do you get done during a day given the resources that you have. In our business, it's number of designs produced, mm-hmm. right, versus what we should produce.
Right.
If you should be able to get 3 designs that are, let's say, 4 foot done, completed in a day, are you getting 2.5 done, 2 done, or 4 done? Most businesses don't even know what that is. In our business, it's pretty easy. It's mathematical. It's how many cut inches do you have? What can the machine run at? You've got to load the machine, you've got to unload it, and then you can figure it out. But throughput and measuring your productivity, how much you're producing in the time allotted, key. And not many businesses do it well, and we don't do it well either, but we got an idea of how we should do it.
We've taken measures to improve it. Okay, we have to revisit those again and reemphasize those again and look at new ones. Productivity, I think what you're trying to say is that productivity is key. And
because that's using the resources you have.
That's exactly right.
Are you being effective with you're spending the money anyway on bringing the people in, having the inventory? Are you utilizing them? Now, assuming you've got the sales, that's the key. If you've got the revenue, then over here to production, what should you be producing every day? Are you measuring it? Mm-hmm. And are you communicating what success looks like? Every business can get better at that. But when you say defense, I'm thinking, what should you be producing to fulfill your customer needs, given the resources that you have? So if you should be producing here, are you here? And understanding why you're falling short, or are you exceeding it? But it's a game. It's like a pickup game. You go to any inner city in America and you see a pickup game. Here's a game where they're keeping score. Here's a game that's casual and they're not keeping score. The game where they're keeping score is always much more fun to watch.
Right.
It's also much more fun to play.
Yeah, it's no question about it. Productivity is one of those terms that gets thrown around very loosely. When you genuinely take the time to examine your processes, examine your, the employee base that you have, we've got good people here. They're all capable, they're all talented, but there are times when I fall under this same category, and from time to time, so do you. I could have done things a little better and a little bit more efficient today to be more productive. And that can be said in just about any facet of this organization. So it's not one of those, well, we just need to get more productive. Well, you have to look at the processes, the formats, and your equipment.
It's amazing to me how many people in every business size, big, small,
right?
They can't tell you what a good day looks like versus a not so good day.
Because they don't have any measuring.
They don't set goals, and they don't check up on the end of the day.
No measuring at all.
Salespeople, sales is a pretty clearly defined function.
Yeah.
Did you make your 15 calls today or not? You either did or you didn't. Now, that doesn't mean if you made 10, it was a bad day.
Right.
You might have gone an hour and a half with a client, which is a great thing, in which case it was a better day than making 15 calls.
True.
Production, what's a good day and what's not a good day? If you don't have a goal and you don't know what your target is, you don't know if you had a good day. It's not about showing up for 8 hours. It's about showing up for 8 hours and hitting your goal.
Right.
So it clearly is about goal setting, and do you hit it or not? And if you don't shoot anybody. But you got to have the adult conversation on what happened here.
Exactly.
That's defense. In my mind, that's defense. What are you supposed to do, and how are you doing it?
Well,
and it's not easy to get there to that clear level of managerial excellence, if you want to call it that.
I think we would both agree that at the top of the defensive strategy totem pole is going to be just what you're talking about. Productivity, ability to measure it, figuring out ways to improve it. No question, that's top of the totem pole.
Think about it. If you've got a business with 7 people, which that's what we got, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a day is 8 hours. Well, you got 8 hours times 7 people. You got 56 hours of potential greatness or mediocrity or terribleness, but everyone's got a to-do sheet, right? And are you executing against the right priorities? Are you all working together?
Mm-hmm.
When do you get to come together? When do you have to break apart? But all businesses, I've been in businesses that are 13 billion and businesses that are less than $1 million. And that's a struggle for all companies. Goal setting, what does the individuals have to do, and how does it all come together, and how do you bring communication together? Really hard challenge.
It is. Absolutely. We've gotten to the point in this business where the employees, as a general rule, across the board, are pretty productive, more so than maybe what we were 4, 5, 6 years ago. That alone, that's where you get your big jump,
right,
where you change people out, and for necessary reasons. But then when you start getting into the real fine points of how to create one of those designs out there, or how to create, the differences between creating a design that's 8 feet in diameter and one that's 50 feet in diameter, you can get more productive on both. And the impact on both to the bottom line is absolutely significant. So I think we would both agree productivity is number one.
Yeah, because when you look at it, you can very easily measure what it costs one employee,
yep,
and if you eliminate it, and if you can do the same amount, what your benefit is to the bottom line.
Absolutely.
Paying someone $50,000, you eliminate them, you can do the same output. $50,000 in theory goes to the bottom line if you don't take some of that and reinvest it, right? Really short-sighted way to do it. The better way to do it is to say, in a small business, keep your resources where they are for as long as possible. Get your productivity up, and that creates more margin in the business. How do you get your productivity up? Well, you got to break, kind of like mapping the customer journey on the offensive side.
Mm-hmm.
You got to map out your production on the cost side and figure out all the key steps, what the productivity should be, what it is, measure it, communicate, and then get the team's involvement on how to get better at it.
No,
I would say that's number one on defense.
Numero uno.
Right?
Now, there's one, it's a pet peeve of mine. Inventory control. Inventory control and management of personnel as it relates to productivity. I think those are the two things that can get you over the top and keep you healthy during an unhealthy situation. Inventory control in this business is difficult on a good day because you're dealing with manufacturers, you're dealing with special colors, non-standard colors. There's a small group of people that supply you with the products that you need. It goes to the relationship, it goes to the rules, it goes to the ability to predict when you're going to need product. that comes from experience and from numerical detail. The inventory control system on Excel that you and Brian put into place last year. It's a very complex matrix of things that you have to do. And oh, by the way, you got to do it every day. And we have two different types of inventory control here. There's the inventory control where we're not over ordering for a project. And it's not easy when you're talking about the types of material that we're talking about and having to buy sometimes from two different suppliers for the same project. And the bigger the project, man, if you're off 10% on an $80,000 project, that's a lot of money. If you're 10% off on an $800 project or an $8,000 project,
no big deal.
It's still kind of a deal, but it ain't $8,000. It ain't $8,000. So that's one issue. Then you've got the issue where you've got to keep constant inventory in here for the turnover of designs that we build every day. You know that we're probably going to use 360 square feet of blue every 4 months. We know we're probably going to use 4,000 square feet of charcoal, every 6 months or something along those lines.
It's interesting.
But trying to,
Let me challenge your premise a little bit on the inventory
Go
control. We're calling it defense. Let's go back to COVID. There's how many distributors are there in New Jersey of hardscape materials? Hundreds?
Goodness, yeah.
Not all of them managed inventory the same way. We know some that shall remain nameless. They were playing offense during COVID and loading up their yards with inventory, weren't they?
Oh, yeah.
They absolutely stole market share. They became known, these people that come to mind, as the go-to person for X.
They were selling to other distributors.
Right.
No.
So clearly they didn't have the same approach.
Correct.
So while some were contracting or just taking the long lead times, some were hoarding inventory, piling it up. Now that can wreak havoc on the supply chain, which it probably did. But clearly the rules weren't set.
But clearly it didn't wreak havoc
on them,
on their cash flow.
Right.
Or it did, but they were willing to take the risk.
Right. They invested in inventory,
right,
and they probably got more business from it. So if you've got the wherewithal financially to do that, inventory can be an offensive thing.
You realize that any manufacturer listens to this podcast, we're probably going to get a phone call.
They're going to cringe.
Yeah, exactly.
But the fact is, it's the truth, right?
It's absolutely the truth.
When you have a certain small minority that are able to buy in on inventory in a crunch of supply chain, clearly the rules aren't well defined.
Exactly.
Right? They're not looking at historical purchases and saying, all right, we can make 50 million square feet. Let's allocate, and oh, by the way, the demand is 90 million feet, right? Square feet.
Mm-hmm.
So we can only take 50 million. That's all we can produce right now. Maybe we ought to go and look at historical purchases and say this distributor was 4% of our historical sales. They get 50 million of a shrunken pie and do it that way. That didn't happen. The people that ordered heavy got close to their orders, or they were able to get more than their fair share of the 50 million when they needed 90.
I think this had something to do with the fact that they didn't know how long this was going to last.
I think that's true. I think it's nobody's fault. Nobody had bad intentions in this.
Exactly.
But clearly that's how the marketplace played out.
Exactly. And that's it's interesting that you bring that up. Now, in our business, what did we have to do? We basically had to take, instead of taking a 3-month position, we had to take a 12-month position. 12 months
to give them more efficient turns and inventory runs. And
if I sat down at a meeting 10 years ago and brought that to the meeting, the other guys around the table looked at me like I had 3 heads. Why we can't do that?
It's a good point. When a supplier, and we've got multiple suppliers, but when a supplier comes to you and says, look, we're in the middle of a supply chain crunch here. We got demand exceeding supply. It would really help us out if you guys lengthen your orders or allow us a more efficient run.
Right.
It's then up to us to say, are we going to listen to them and be good partners? Or are we going to say, no, we got to continue to order our small one and not be flexible? Mm-hmm. So part of the strategy is, look, I think we both believe, we've got to have great supplier relationships.
Exactly.
So if a supplier says it would help us if you do X, Y, and Z, that doesn't mean we're not going to challenge them. But we're going to be inclined to say yes. And can we do a little bit more for you, right? Because we need good supplier relationships. But that's a strategy. When you're going into it, the better the relationships you have with your supply partners, the stronger the business. That's obvious, but it's amazing how many people have confrontational relationships.
It's the first thing we brought up when we just started talking about this topic was the ability to know your suppliers really, really well, and they should know you too.
Look, I'll give a shout out here to our friends over at Hanover Pavers. This company amazes me every time we've always said this company knows how to do samples. I saw a social media post. They came out with a granite-like paver line.
Right.
I said, that's pretty interesting. We ought to at least see it and pass it around the table and see what Brian thinks, see what you think, see if we can collaborate and come up with a design series from that. So I sent an email to Hanover. I said, hey, I saw your social media post. Can you guys get me samples? And I forgot, quite frankly, I forgot that I sent that. Within 48 hours, there's a box at our front door, and there's the samples.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at what we do. We struggle with that. Now, they clearly, they are set up. They've got a sample room. They've got people that just manage that. But it's a pretty impressive, and I really respected that they can get it out that quick, that responsive. Small little thing, but when you talk about mapping the customer journey, that piece of the world, they're as good as any supplier I've seen.
I think that came about as a result of the fact that a big component of their market, the biggest market they probably call on or target, is the landscape architect and landscape designer market, and those people require samples.
Right.
They need to
so
see.
They're set up for it.
They're not going to look at something online and say, "Oh, I like that color." They want to see a sample of it.
Right.
And it's a. There's no question. You're right about that.
But and we talk to landscape architects, and
Sure.
when their name comes up, we can't praise them enough in terms of how they're set up for this type of thing.
Exactly.
So, but the point is, good quality relationships with your supplier base, whoever those suppliers are, is nothing but an asset, in my opinion. You don't want confrontational relationships with your suppliers. Some old school people, everything's a confrontational, everything's a battle.
True. Well, what I wanted to just briefly revisit was the positions we took on ordering inventory. Now, some of that is you rely on experience, historical data, and common sense, and also the cost of the material. You take a 12-month position, the one thing that you guard against is the fact that in 12 months that price is going to go up 5%, at least 5%. And in this economy, it could go up 10, it could go up 12%. So it does pay off there. But at the end of the day, that decision came down to you. You had to make that decision. And as I recall, you didn't waste any time in making that decision. That was pretty quick. And it was based upon the fact that we had a certain set of circumstances that were given to us by one of our main suppliers, and they requested that we kind of take that position. Give us a reason to build a lot of square footage at one time, and that's what we did. But you didn't hesitate in making that decision. Why?
Well, you've got to, as a business owner, you've got to determine how do you stay in business, right? So you've got X number of there's no unlimited money pit of where you can put your money. But what can put you out of business? I'll give you another example. Pallets. If we don't have a pallet, we go out of business. We used to buy 30 pallets at a shot for $9.
Yep.
That went up with the supply. Now we've got to buy 150 to 200. And oh, by the way, they don't cost $9 anymore. They cost $32. Freaking crazy. On a pallet. And now we got to jam the warehouse full of pallets.
We used to give pallets away,
and now we got to hoard them, and we got to buy a year's worth of supply.
All of a sudden, that stuff that we used to give away is now worth $30 a pallet.
So some of this stuff, the decisions you got to make, whether it's buying a year's worth of inventory of pallets or going longer on raw materials, it's what do you need to do to survive, right? And again, you can be confrontational and push back on all of it, but at the end of the day, you can't have confrontational relationships. It really is old school. A lot of people, they'd fight with their vendors, and they try and drive them down on price, drive them down on terms. I always tell people, my suppliers, look, my strategy has always been, look, I'm a small business. I'm never going to be one of your top 5 customers. Just knowing who you deal with in your customer base.
Sure.
But I'd be hard-pressed to say I'm not going to be one of your best customers. You're never going to have to sweat for me if you're going to get paid. You're going to get paid on time, if not early. I'm going to tell our bookkeeper, pay them right when the bill comes in. There's no need to we don't have so much money where waiting the extra 20 days is going to make us $1 million of interest.
Right.
That's not going to happen. So get the bill. If you get the bill within 5 days or when we take the product, pay the thing in 5 days. I don't care if it says 30 days. And then when they call them back. Let's have them in. Let's invite them to be part of our business planning process. Let's bring them to the plant. So it is a strategy of mine to say, all right, number one, what can put us out of business? And then take that off the table, right? Then have great relationships with your suppliers and all the different stakeholders.
Sure.
It costs you a little bit more money probably, but I got to think, COVID was a great thing. We'd call our suppliers and we'd be talking during the weekend. There's videos of us recounting some of those stories. But I think you've got to make the decisions that are mission critical to the business. So now the question is, if you don't have the money, if they require money, that's a different set of circumstances.
And
but
there's another leg that's added to that.
But then you're not really building. If you don't have the money, then you've got bigger problems with your business.
You're
not profitable. Your margins aren't right.
That's something that should have been
productivity.
handled 5 years ago.
So all of this
your
is
decisions
the
in pricing. All
That's
that
right.
Exactly.
So you've got to look at every aspect of the business, whether
Exactly.
it's, to your point, whether it's a downturn or not. And cash is the ultimate. Businesses that are healthy and profitable generally build cash over time, and then they reinvest it in their business.
Well, that's inventory control. Ooh, boy. People shudder at that. I think we handle it very well. I think we handle it pretty well. We really do. When it comes to making sure that clients get their products on time, the last thing you want to have happen is that somebody comes in and says, I'm going to be about 8 plates short on dark blue. What? Excuse me?
Right.
How did that happen?
Right.
We spent the time, we invested the time on the Excel spreadsheet to keep track of all that. How did that happen? Well, anomalies occur in every business from time to time, but they rarely occur here in regards to that now. Whereas a few years ago, that could happen.
Right.
So,
well, it's part of the challenge of growth. You got to have better processes when you grow.
Exactly.
You can't do it the way you used to do it.
No, and but it's absolutely key, and the easiest part of the cutback in anticipating an economic downturn is those ancillary suppliers that supply you with product that's instrumental to running your equipment, instrumental to handling the packaging of your product, all those sorts of things. It never hurts to sit down with the salesperson and revisit your pricing.
Sure.
Now, at the end of the day, I think you're going to find that has an impact, but not as much impact as the first two items we just talked about.
Right.
But still, it's part of the strategy.
Sure.
So,
well, I think it goes back to relationships. You want to be able to innovate at all times, if possible.
Right.
So bringing in, it's amazing what a salesperson is for a resource. Salespeople tend to know the R&D people. If it's another manufacturer,
sure.
You want to bring the salespeople in as much as possible because they might be working on initiatives, they might be dealing with customers. Just a knowledge sharing alone, a salesperson is a tremendous resource. We're small, but we do have a national footprint, and we get people's products into places they normally wouldn't get in had it not been for us.
Correct.
Gotta think that matters.
But
sales guy, to your point, sales guys play a huge, massive role.
Absolutely. One of the first things you did when you took over the business. Okay, Mike, who are we? Who's calling on us from this company? Who's calling on us from this company? And who's calling on us from this company?
We didn't have any salespeople.
Nobody, and nobody. And that ended almost immediately.
It's maddening to me how you can buy more than, pick a number, $10,000 a year from anybody and not have a salesperson assigned.
Right.
Now, a lot of people do outbound in the world of tight resources.
And in two cases, it's a hell of a lot more than $10,000. A hell of a lot more.
The question is, do they not have a sales force?
Right.
Well, the answer is, yeah, they got a sales force. What are we, the redheaded stepchild? Are we not capable of having it? What is the deal here? Are you consciously deciding not to have a salesperson?
Either that or Mike, you
know
pissed off so many people.
I mean, we're not even worthy of having a salesperson assigned. So it's like, look, so part of managing any environment, boom time, downturn, if you can't even have a relationship with a salesperson because they don't find it necessary to assign to, number one, are we asking? But we've got to find value in a salesperson, right? To form a relationship with the company through a salesperson. But not having a salesperson assigned is a major problem.
It's
And I'm guessing we're not the only one that
probably
was in that
not.
situation.
But it's akin to it's a small slap in the face, and here's why. Because sometimes it's not the salesman who's making the decision
Right,
as to whether he calls on us or not.
Right.
Someone else is telling him, no, you don't.
Yeah, they just call their orders in. They're easy. They're a house
That's
account.
right. It's not. Give Mike or Mark a call every once in a while. But what we found out is that, or what they find out is that we know more about their product sometimes than they do, because we have to study it. We spend a lot of time on it because those phone calls that we make, trying to be efficient and productive, we can speak to those products and answer questions about those products without having to. I'll get back. Let me make a note. I'll get back to you on that. No.
Well,
as soon as you say that, 50% of the potential of that sale goes right out the door.
Right. Look, I think the reason why you want to, if you're any hardscape manufacturer, you want to have a relationship with Paver Art, because and we're in New Jersey, when that landscape architect from Northern California calls and they say, what do you know about green products in the industry?
Right.
Or what do you have for special colors? Or what do you have for labyrinth designs? Have you ever done something like that? And
Excellent
we can
point.
impact a manufacturer's business. We are in a position to become a distributor for, again, business that they wouldn't have gotten had it not been for us.
Exactly.
Now, is that a reason to do you want to put your best? I mean, we don't need the red carpet, but a salesperson once every 6 months popping by, having a business discussion, can only help.
Well, I think there's from a defensive posture, planning and working a plan prior to an economic downturn potentially coming around.
I would say
making sure those salespeople should
if I'm a small
they should
business,
up their game significantly.
Absolutely. If I'm a small business owner or a leader in any business, the defense suppliers have to go on that list, and you've got to score your relationship from 1 to 100, 100 being perfect, 1 being non-existent, and see where you are in that continuum, and go down the line for all your key suppliers and rate your relationship. And how would I rate it 100? Do you know the owner of that supplier business, or do you know a high-level person? Can you get something done quickly? And will they work with you? Will they give you new products? There's probably 30 good reasons or questions to ask and score to see where one would become a 90 and another one would be 70. And then you want to, like anything else in business, work to get it better over time. It's not their responsibility. Communication's a two-way street. It's got to go both ways.
Well, I think we've beat this subject up pretty good.
On defense, I think so.
And on offense too. And what I would say is that the improvements can always be made in any organization. That includes ours, and anybody that has that's listening to this podcast. I'm sure
I'm sure we missed a few things. We'd love to hear them.
We'd love to hear back on something like that. But that's I think we beat it. I think we beat it up pretty good. That's the term we use here at Paver Art. We beat that up pretty good.
We're scoring a 95 on beating things up.
So, thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.